The crack of Tobias Henderson's hand against her cheekbone echoed through the small farmhouse kitchen like a gunshot. Tessa Henderson stumbled backwards, the taste of blood filling her mouth as her hip collided with the rough-hewn table. The year was 1873, and out here in the Nebraska territory, a man's home was his castle and his wife his property, to do with as he pleased. "You think I don't know?" Tobias roared, his face contorted with rage, whiskey fumes wafting from his breath. "You think I'm blind? I see how you look at that fool at the general store." Tessa raised a trembling hand to her throbbing cheek. "Tobias, please. I've done nothing wrong. I was just being polite." "Polite?" He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in like iron bands. "Is that what you call it? Making a fool of me in front of the whole town." 5 years of marriage to Tobias had taught Tessa when his anger would pass and when it wouldn't. The wild look in his bloodshot eyes told her tonight was different. Something had broken inside him, or perhaps it had always been broken, and she'd been too naive to see it. When he released her arm to reach for the whiskey bottle, Tessa saw her chance. She bolted for the door, heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, glass shattered against the wall where her head had been moments before. "You come back here," Tobias bellowed, his boots heavy on the wooden floor as he gave chase. The crisp autumn air hit Tessa's face as she fled into the darkness. The moon hung low and full in the sky, illuminating the farmyard in silver light. She ran blindly, her cotton dress catching on fence posts and brambles. Their nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, too far to reach on foot before Tobias caught her. As his shouts grew closer, Tessa spotted the root cellar door, half hidden by overgrown weeds at the edge of their property. She'd stocked it herself just last week, preparing for the coming winter. With shaking hands, she tugged it open and descended into the earthy darkness, pulling the door shut above her. The underground space smelled of soil and stored vegetables. Tessa crouched in the corner, pulling a burlap sack over her shoulders against the chill. Through the cracks in the wooden door, she could see Tobias stalking the yard, lantern held high. "Tessa." His voice had taken on a falsely conciliatory tone. "Come on out now. I didn't mean it. You know how I get when I drink." She pressed her fist against her mouth to stifle a sob. How many times had she heard those words? How many bruises had she hidden beneath high-necked dresses and long sleeves? Tobias prowled the yard for what felt like hours, his calls alternating between sweet promises and vicious threats. Eventually, his voice grew distant as he moved toward the barn and outbuildings. Tessa shivered in the darkness, drawing her knees to her chest. She had nowhere to go. Her parents had died 2 years ago, and her only sister lived back east, having married a banker from Boston. Tobias had isolated her from the few friends she'd made when they first arrived in Nebraska, claiming they filled her head with nonsense ideas. Time passed in a haze of fear and cold. The root cellar, which had seemed a haven at first, became a prison as night deepened. Rats scurried in the corners, and spiders crawled over the shelves of preserved food. Still, Tessa dared not leave. She dozed fitfully, startling awake at every sound. Dawn had just begun to lighten the sky when she heard the approach of hoofbeats. Tessa froze, listening. It wasn't Tobias. He would have come on foot from the house. A visitor, perhaps? Or someone passing by on the road. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped near the cellar. Tessa held her breath as footsteps crunched in the frost-covered grass above. The cellar door creaked open, and daylight flooded in, blinding her after hours in darkness. A tall silhouette appeared against the sky. Not Tobias, whose stocky frame she would have recognized instantly. This man was lean and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Hello," a deep voice called. "Is someone down there?" Tessa pressed herself further into the corner, clutching the burlap sack like a shield. The man descended a few steps, then stopped when he spotted her. In the growing light, She could see kind eyes in a sun-weathered face. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, denim trousers, a worn flannel shirt, and a leather vest. "Madam," he said, his voice gentling as if speaking to a spooked horse. "Are you hurt?" Tessa couldn't find her voice. Her throat felt raw from unshed tears and the cold night air. The stranger remained where he was, making no move to come closer. "My name's Adam Calloway. I work at the Morgan Ranch, just over the ridge." He gestured vaguely eastward. "I was riding fence when I saw something odd at this property. The front door's wide open, and there's broken glass everywhere." Tessa's breath caught. Had Tobias left? Or was this some trick? "Is this your home, madam?" Adam asked. She nodded slightly. "And I'm guessing the man passed out drunk on the kitchen floor is your husband?" Another nod, more hesitant. Adam's expression hardened slightly, his eyes taking in her swollen cheek and split lip. "Did he do that to you?" Tessa looked away, shame burning through her despite knowing she'd done nothing to deserve Tobias's rage. Adam seemed to understand her silence. He removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair, and crouched down so he wasn't looming over her. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "He won't be waking anytime soon. Must have finished that bottle after you got away." The simple kindness in his voice broke something in Tessa. Tears spilled down her cheeks, stinging the cut on her lip. "My horse is just outside," Adam continued. "I can take you somewhere safe, if you'd like. There's a doctor in town who's discreet. Or the sheriff, if you want to file a complaint." Tessa finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "He is the law's drinking companion. The sheriff would only bring me back." Adam's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Then we'll find another way. But you can't stay here, madam." "Tessa," she said, surprising herself. "My name is Tessa Henderson." "Miss Tessa," Adam acknowledged with a slight bow of his head. "Will you let me help you?" She hesitated, years of Tobias's warnings echoing in her mind. "Don't trust anyone. They'll take advantage of you. You need me." But what choice did she have? Stay and eventually face Tobias's unleashed fury, or trust this stranger with kind eyes? "Yes," she finally whispered. "Please help me." Adam extended his hand, and after a moment's pause, Tessa took it. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip gentle as he helped her to her feet. Her legs, stiff from the cold and hours of crouching, buckled beneath her. "Easy now," Adam said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "Take your time." When she was sure she could walk, Tessa followed him up the cellar steps into the pale morning light. A chestnut gelding stood nearby, reins loosely looped around a fence post. "Do you need anything from a house?" Adam asked. Tessa glanced toward the farmhouse, suddenly afraid Tobias would appear in the doorway. "I can't go back in there." "You don't have to," Adam assured her. "I can go if you tell me what you need." She shook her head. "Nothing I can't live without." Adam studied her for a moment, then shrugged out of his sheepskin jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The wool lining was warm from his body, and the leather outer shell smelled of horses and pine smoke. "It's a fair ride to the ranch," he explained. "Don't want you catching a chill." He helped her mount the horse, then swung up behind her. Tessa stiffened at the proximity, and used to being so close to any man but Tobias, but Adam kept a respectful distance, reaching around her only to take the reins. "Ready?" he asked. Tessa took one last look at the farmhouse that had been her home and prison for 5 years. In the early light, it looked deceptively peaceful. "Yes," she said, turning away. "I'm ready." Adam clicked his tongue, and the horse moved forward at an easy walk. As they reached the road, Tessa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't know what awaited her, but for this moment, riding away with a kind stranger, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The Morgan Ranch sprawled across several hundred acres of Nebraska prairie, the main house rising from the landscape like a fortress of civilization amidst the wild grasslands. It was larger than Tessa had expected, a two-story structure of sturdy timber with a wide front porch and smoke curling from two stone chimneys. "My boss is a fair man," Adam explained as they approached. Thomas Morgan started with nothing but a plot of land and a handful of cattle. Now he runs one of the most successful operations in the territory. Tessa nodded, but anxiety knotted her stomach. What would these people think of her? A bruised woman fleeing her husband in the middle of the night, with nothing but the clothes on her back. As if sensing her thoughts, Adam added, "Mrs. Morgan Alice, she's got a kind heart. She takes in strays of all kinds. Last month it was a family whose wagon broke down on their way west. Before that, a young fellow running from trouble back east." "And now me," Tessa murmured. "And now you," Adam agreed, his voice gentle. "But only if you want. I can take you to town instead, or to the stage depot if you prefer to travel on." Tessa considered her options. With no money and no family nearby, her choices were limited. The ranch, she decided, at least for now. As they rode into the yard, activity swirled around them. Cowboys moved between the barn and bunkhouse. A young boy carried buckets of water to the kitchen garden, and a woman in a practical calico dress supervised the hanging of laundry on a line strung between two posts. The woman turned at the sound of hoofbeats, shading her eyes against the morning sun. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pinned in a practical bun and a face lined by years of prairie weather. "Adam Calloway," she called, her tone more curious than accusatory. "I thought you were checking the north fence line today." Adam dismounted, then reached up to help Tessa down. "Change of plans, Mrs. Morgan. This is Tessa Henderson. She needs a safe place to stay." Alice Morgan's sharp eyes took in Tessa's bruised face and borrowed jacket, understanding dawning immediately. "Of course she does," she said, stepping forward with outstretched hands. "Come inside, my dear. You look half frozen." Tessa allowed herself to be led toward the house, glancing back once to see Adam leading his horse toward the barn, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. The interior of the Morgan home was warm and welcoming, with polished wood floors and simple but quality furnishings. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of baking bread permeated the air. "Sit here by the fire," Alice instructed, guiding Tessa to a comfortable chair. "I'll fetch some tea and something for those cuts." Left alone, Tessa took in her surroundings. The room spoke of modest prosperity and careful stewardship. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that appeared well read. A half-finished quilt lay draped over a wooden frame in the corner. It was everything a home should be: warm, lived in, safe. Alice returned carrying a tray laden with a teapot, cups, and a small jar of salve. "Arnica and witch hazel," she explained, setting the tray down. "Best thing for bruises. My grandmother's recipe." As Alice poured the tea, a tall man with iron-gray hair and a full beard entered from what appeared to be a study. "Alice, have you seen my—" He stopped short at the sight of Tessa. "Forgive me. I didn't realize we had a visitor." "Thomas, this is Tessa Henderson," Alice said. "Adam brought her in this morning. She'll be staying with us for a while." Thomas Morgan's keen eyes took in Tessa's appearance, and his expression softened with understanding. "You're most welcome here, Mrs. Henderson." "Thank you," Tessa managed, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. Adam explained the situation. Thomas asked his wife. Alice nodded. "Enough for now. The rest can wait until our guest has had a chance to rest and recover." Thomas seemed satisfied with this. "I'll be in town today. Anything you need me to pick up?" "Perhaps some fabric," Alice suggested. "And see if Dr. Wilson has any of that sleeping tonic left. The one without laudanum." After Thomas departed, Alice turned her attention back to Tessa. "Now, let's see to those injuries." And then I think a hot bath and some clean clothes, don't you? For the first time in years, Tessa felt tears of gratitude rather than fear well in her eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. Alice's weathered hand covered Tessa's. My own sister suffered at the hands of a cruel husband for 15 years before she found the courage to leave. I vowed then that I would never turn away a woman in need. She squeezed Tessa's hand gently. You're safe here, child. For as long as you need to be. That afternoon, freshly bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown, Tessa slept deeply in a small but comfortable bedroom at the back of the house. When she woke, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floorboards. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then the events of the previous night and morning came rushing back. She sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles and the throb of her bruised face. A soft knock at the door preceded Alice's entrance. You're awake. Good. I've brought some supper. She carried a tray with a bowl of fragrant stew, a slice of bread, and a cup of tea. I can come to the table, Tessa protested. Nonsense. You need rest. Alice set the tray on the bedside table. Besides, we've got a full house tonight. The men are celebrating the end of Roundup. It's quite boisterous. As if to punctuate her words, a burst of male laughter echoed from somewhere outside. Adam said Tobias was unconscious when he left, Tessa said hesitantly. What if he comes looking for me? Alice's expression hardened slightly. Thomas has taken precautions. We have men watching the road, and everyone's been instructed not to speak of your presence here to anyone in town. She patted Tessa's hand. Try not to worry. Eat, regain your strength. Tomorrow is soon enough to make plans. After Alice left, Tessa ate slowly, savoring the rich flavors of the stew. It had been a long time since she'd enjoyed a meal prepared by someone else. Tobias had expected her to manage the house, garden, and kitchen without help, despite also working alongside him in the fields. When she finished eating, Tessa moved to the window. From her vantage point, she could see the bunkhouse where light spilled from every window. Shadowy figures moved inside, and the sounds of an accordion and harmonica drifted through the evening air. As she watched, the door opened, and Adam stepped outside. He paused on the small porch, lighting a cigarette, the match briefly illuminating his features. In the daylight, she hadn't noticed how handsome he was, with his strong jaw and straight nose. He leaned against a post, gazing up at the star-filled sky, seemingly lost in thought. Tessa stepped back from the window, feeling like an intruder on his private moment. She returned to bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin, and tried not to think about what tomorrow might bring. For now, she was safe, fed, and warm more than she had dared hope for when she'd fled into the night. Over the next week, Tessa settled into the rhythm of life at the Morgan Ranch. Alice welcomed her help with household tasks, from churning butter to mending clothes, but was careful not to overburden her as she recovered. True to his word, Thomas Morgan had sent men to town to discreetly inquire about Tobias. The reports were not encouraging. Tobias had been seen at the saloon, drinking heavily and making threats about what he'd do when he found his runaway wife. The sheriff, as Tessa had predicted, seemed inclined to support Tobias's right to reclaim his property. The law won't help you, Thomas told Tessa frankly during a quiet conversation in his study. But that doesn't mean you're without options. What options does a woman in my position have? Tessa asked, genuinely curious. She'd spent so long believing she was trapped. You could file for divorce on grounds of cruelty, though it would require you to appear in court, Thomas explained. Or you could travel to another territory, perhaps even California, and start fresh under a different name. The prospect of such drastic measures was overwhelming. I need time to think, Tessa said. Thomas nodded. You have it. You're welcome here for as long as you need. As days turned into weeks, Tessa found herself watching for Adam whenever he returned from his duties around the ranch. Unlike the other cowboys, who lived in the bunkhouse, Adam occupied a small cabin near the main house, a privilege of his position as foreman. She learned from Alice that Adam had been with the Morgans for nearly 8 years, arriving as a 19-year-old with nothing but the clothes on his back and a remarkable way with horses. He'd worked his way up from stable boy to foreman through sheer determination and loyalty. He doesn't speak much of his past, Alice told Tessa as they kneaded bread dough together one morning. But Thomas believes he came from a troubled home. Perhaps that's why he was so quick to help you. Tessa's encounters with Adam were brief, but always left her feeling oddly flustered. He would tip his hat politely when they passed in the yard, or offer a quiet madam if they happened to be in the same room. Once, when she was struggling to carry a heavy basket of laundry, he appeared as if from nowhere to take it from her hands. "Allow me," he'd said, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. "Thank you," she'd replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "You're very kind." "Not particularly," he'd answered with a slight smile. "Just well raised, despite everything." Before she could ask what he meant, he'd moved on, carrying the basket to the clothesline with easy strength. As November deepened toward winter, Tessa began to feel restless. Her bruises had faded, and with them, some of her fear. She couldn't remain a guest of the Morgans indefinitely, living on their charity while contributing only household help in return. One crisp morning, she approached Alice with her concerns. "I need to find work," she said. "Real work that pays a wage." Alice looked up from her mending. "You're considering staying in the area, then? Not returning east to your sister?" Tessa sighed. "I haven't heard from Caroline in over a year. Tobias." She hesitated. Tobias may have intercepted her letters. Or perhaps she simply gave up writing when I rarely replied. "Then write to her now," Alice suggested. "Explain what happened. Family is important." "I will," Tessa promised. "But in the meantime, I need to support myself. I was a schoolteacher before I married. Perhaps there's a need for one nearby." Alice's eyes brightened. As a matter of fact, the settlement at Willow Creek lost their teacher last month. She married a cattle buyer from Kansas City and moved east. Thomas mentioned the school board is desperate to find a replacement before winter makes travel difficult. Hope bloomed in Tessa's chest. "How far is Willow Creek?" "About 15 miles south. Far enough from your old home that you needn't worry about casual encounters with Tobias, but close enough that we could still see each other regularly." The idea of independence, of using her education to support herself, was exhilarating. But one concern remained. What about Tobias? "Legally, I'm still his wife. He could claim any wages I earn." Alice's expression hardened. "Leave that to Thomas. He has connections with a lawyer in Omaha who specializes in such matters. And in the meantime," her voice softened, "you'll have friends watching out for you." The following Sunday, Thomas Morgan drove Tessa to Willow Creek in his wagon to meet with the school board. Adam rode alongside as an escort, his rifle resting across his saddle. "Is that necessary?" Tessa had asked when she saw the weapon. "Just a precaution," Thomas assured her. "Tobias has been making threats in town. Better safe than sorry." The journey passed without incident, the rolling prairie stretching in all directions under a vast blue sky. Tessa found herself stealing glances at Adam as he rode beside the wagon, his posture easy in the saddle, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Once, he caught her looking and offered a small smile that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by her reaction. She was still a married woman, after all, even if she had no intention of returning to Tobias. Willow Creek proved to be a growing settlement with a general store, a church, a saloon, and several dozen houses scattered along its main street. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with a bell tower. The school board consisting of the local minister, the storekeeper, and a gruff rancher named Peterson interviewed Tessa in the church's small office. They seemed impressed by her education and previous experience, though Reverend Clark expressed concern about her marital situation. "We've heard rumors," he said delicately, "about difficulties with your husband." Tessa sat straighter, meeting his gaze directly. "My husband is an abusive man, Reverend. I left to save my life. If that makes me unsuitable to teach your children, I understand." The men exchanged glances. Finally, Mr. Peterson spoke. "My sister suffered a similar situation years ago. No woman should endure such treatment." He looked at his colleagues. "I say we hire Mrs. Henderson. She's qualified, and Lord knows we need a teacher before winter sets in." The others agreed, and just like that, Tessa had secured employment. She would start the following week, living in a small room attached to the schoolhouse, a common arrangement for unmarried teachers, though in her case, an exception was being made. As they left the church, Thomas clasped her hand warmly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Henderson. I knew they'd recognize your worth." Adam, who had been waiting with the horses, straightened as they approached. "Good news." "The best," Tessa said, unable to contain her smile. "I start next Monday." Something flickered in Adam's eyes, pleasure mixed with something that might have been regret. "That's wonderful. The children of Willow Creek are fortunate." On the journey back to the Morgan Ranch, Tessa's mind raced with plans and preparations. She would need teaching materials, clothes suitable for her new position, perhaps some personal items to make the small room feel like home. As if reading her thoughts, Thomas said, "Alice has been putting together a trunk of necessities for you. And I've taken the liberty of ordering some school books and supplies from Omaha. They should arrive on Wednesday's stage." Tessa was overwhelmed by their generosity. "I don't know how to thank you both." "Live well," Thomas said simply. "That's thanks enough." When they returned to the ranch, Alice was waiting on the porch, her face alight with anticipation. Tessa's enthusiastic recounting of the interview was interrupted by a ranch hand galloping into the yard. "Mr. Morgan," the young cowboy called, reining his lathered horse to a stop. "Trouble in town. That fella Henderson is making a scene at the saloon, threatening to burn down the ranch if you don't return his property." Tessa felt the blood drain from her face. Thomas's expression darkened. "How drunk is he?" "Drunk enough to be dangerous, sir. Sheriff's not doing anything to stop him." Thomas turned to Adam. "Take some men into town. Don't engage Henderson directly, but make our presence known. I want witnesses to his threats."
Adam nottet grimly.
"And Mrs. Henderson?" "I'll stay with her," Alice said firmly. "We'll be fine." As Adam and several cowboys rode out, Thomas placed a reassuring hand on Tessa's shoulder. "This changes nothing. You'll still go to Willow Creek as planned, but perhaps a day earlier than we discussed, just to be safe." That night, Tessa packed her few belongings with trembling hands. The peace she'd found at the Morgan Ranch seemed suddenly fragile. What if Tobias made good on his threats? What if innocent people were hurt because of her? A soft knock interrupted her troubled thoughts. She opened the door to find Adam standing there, hat in hand, his expression serious. "May I come in?" he asked. "Just for a moment. It's important." Tessa hesitated, aware of the impropriety, but nodded and stepped aside. Adam entered, keeping a respectful distance. "I wanted you to know what happened in town." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of agitation. "Henderson was making wild threats, but he's all talk when sober men are watching. He backed down when we arrived." Relief flooded through Tessa. "Thank you for telling me." "There's more," Adam continued. "I spoke with some people who know him. Apparently, he's been telling everyone you ran off with another man, that you stole money from him before leaving." "That's not true," Tessa protested. "I took nothing but the clothes I was wearing." "I know," Adam said gently. "But he's trying to turn public opinion against you. If he can't force you back, he wants to ruin your reputation." Tessa sank onto the edge of the bed. Will this ever end? Will he ever let me go? Adam knelt before her, not touching her but close enough that she could see the fierce determination in his eyes. Listen to me, Tessa. Men like Henderson, they feed on fear. The moment you stop being afraid, you take away their power. How can I not be afraid? She whispered. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what men like him are capable of, Adam said, a shadow crossing his face. My father was cut from the same cloth. He beat my mother for years until the consumption took her. Then he started on me. Tessa's hand moved involuntarily to cover his. I'm so sorry. Adam looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. I ran away when I was 16. Worked my way west, job to job, until I found the Morgans. They taught me that not all families are built on fear. He hesitated, then continued, What I'm trying to say is I understand your fear, but I also know you're stronger than you believe. The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. For a moment, she thought he might move closer, might even kiss her, and realized with a shock that she wanted him to. Instead, he stood, gently withdrawing his hand from hers. I've said more than I intended. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Tessa said softly. Adam moved toward the door, then paused. I'll be escorting you to Willow Creek tomorrow. Thomas thinks it's safer than sending you in the wagon. Thank you, Tessa said, for everything. After he left, Tessa stood at the window for a long time, watching as Adam crossed the yard to his cabin. The moonlight silvered his hair and cast his shadow long across the ground. Something was changing between them, something fragile and unspoken that both thrilled and terrified her. Dawn broke, clear and cold the next morning. Tessa dressed in her warmest clothes, a wool dress and heavy shawl that Alice had given her. Her few possessions fit into a single carpet bag, though Thomas assured her the trunk of supplies would follow in the wagon later that day. Adam was waiting in the yard with 2 saddle horses. Ever ridden astride, Mrs. Henderson? He asked. Tessa shook her head. Like most women, she'd only ever ridden side saddle, and rarely at that. It's easier for a long journey, Adam explained. And faster, if we need to outrun trouble. The practicality of this outweighed any concerns about propriety. With Adam's help, Tessa mounted the gentle mare he'd selected for her. The position felt strange at first, her skirts bunched awkwardly around her legs, but after a few minutes of walking the horse around the yard, she grew more comfortable. They set out as the sun cleared the horizon, following a trail that wound through rolling grasslands. Adam rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of danger. They spoke little at first, the rhythm of the horse's hooves and the vast openness of the prairie making conversation seem unnecessary. As the morning warmed, Tessa found herself relaxing into the journey. There was something freeing about riding across the open land, the wind in her face, and the endless sky above. You're a natural, Adam commented, dropping back to ride beside her. Most first-time riders are sore and complaining by now. Tessa laughed, surprising herself with the sound. Oh, I'll be plenty sore tomorrow, I'm sure. But for now, it's exhilarating. Adam smiled, and Tessa was struck again by how his entire face transformed when he did so. The serious cowboy became suddenly boyish, with crinkles around his eyes and a dimple in one cheek. Did you always want to be a teacher? He asked. For as long as I can remember, Tessa replied. My father was the schoolmaster in our town back in Pennsylvania. He taught me to love learning. You must miss him. Every day. Tessa adjusted her grip on the reins. He wouldn't have approved of Tobias. My mother warned me, but I was too headstrong to listen. We all make mistakes when we're young, Adam said. The important thing is you found the courage to leave. They rode in companionable silence for a while longer before stopping by a small creek to rest the horses and eat the lunch Alice had packed for them: cold chicken, bread, and apples. Sitting on a fallen log, watching Adam check the horses' shoes, Tessa felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, she was making her own decisions, charting her own course. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "In the future, I mean. Will you stay at the Morgan Ranch forever?" Adam straightened, considering the question. "I've been saving to buy my own place someday. Nothing fancy, just enough land for a small herd and a decent house." He glanced at her, then away. "A man gets to thinking about putting down roots as he gets older." "That sounds nice," Tessa said softly, trying to ignore the way her heart quickened at the image his words conjured: a small house on the prairie, children playing in the yard, Adam returning from the fields at sunset. They continued their journey, the terrain gradually changing as they approached Willow Creek. Fields of wheat and corn replaced the open grasslands, and the occasional farmhouse dotted the landscape. They were within sight of the settlement when Adam suddenly reined his horse to a stop, his posture alert. "Riders coming," he said tersely. 3 of them moving fast. Tessa felt a jolt of fear. "Tobias?" Adam's hand moved to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Can't tell yet. But let's not take chances." He guided his horse off the trail, gesturing for Tessa to follow. They took cover behind a small rise, where they could see without being seen. The riders appeared on the trail moments later, 3 men pushing their horses hard. Even from a distance, Tessa recognized Tobias's stocky figure and the distinctive white blaze on his horse's face. "It's him," she whispered, her throat suddenly dry. "With the blacksmith and that drifter who's been staying at the saloon." Adam's expression hardened. "They're heading toward town. Must have heard about your new position." He glanced at Tessa. "We can wait until they pass, then take a different route in." But even as he spoke, Tobias reined his horse to a stop, scanning the surrounding landscape. Something, perhaps the fresh tracks of their horses, had caught his attention. "Tessa," he bellowed, his voice carrying across the open space. "I know you're out here. Show yourself, woman." Tessa shrank lower behind the rise, trembling. Adam placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Stay here," he said quietly. "No matter what happens, don't show yourself unless I signal it's safe." Before she could protest, he had mounted his horse and ridden out from behind their cover, approaching the 3 men at a deliberate pace. "Gentlemen," she heard him call. "Something I can help you with?" Tobias's voice rose in anger. "Where is she?" "I know you've got my wife stashed somewhere." "I don't know what you're talking about," Adam replied evenly. "I'm just heading into Willow Creek on ranch business." "Liar," Tobias spat. "The whole county knows Morgan's been harboring her. Now she's taking up at the schoolhouse, bold as brass, like she's not a married woman." From her hiding place, Tessa could see Tobias's face reddening with rage. The 2 men with him shifted uneasily, perhaps not having bargained for this level of confrontation. "Mr. Henderson," Adam said, his voice still calm, "whatever grievance you have with your wife, this isn't the way to resolve it. The law—" "Don't talk to me about the law." Tobias cut him off. "A man has rights. She's my property, same as my land and cattle." Adam's voice hardened. "A woman isn't property, Henderson. And from the look of her face, when I found her hiding in your root cellar, you've forfeited any right to call yourself her husband." Tobias's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. "You sanctimonious bastard. You've been betting her, haven't you? That's why you're so eager to protect her." Even from a distance, Tessa could see the dangerous stillness that came over Adam. "I'd be careful about making accusations like that, Henderson. Mrs. Henderson is a lady deserving of respect, which is more than I can say for you." The tension in the air was palpable. Tessa held her breath, terrified that violence would erupt at any moment. But then, unexpectedly, the blacksmith placed a restraining hand on Tobias's arm. "Come on, Tobias," he said. "This isn't worth getting shot over. Let's head back to town, have a drink, think this through." For a long moment, Tobias resisted, his eyes fixed hatefully on Adam. Then, with a curse, he yanked his horse's head around. "This isn't over," he warned. "Not by a long shot." The three men galloped away, raising dust that lingered in the still afternoon air. Only when they were well out of sight did Adam return to Tessa's hiding place. She emerged shakily, legs weak with relief and residual fear. "I thought he was going to shoot you." Adam's expression was grim.
He thought about it.
But Henderson's a coward at heart. He won't act unless the odds are heavily in his favor. He helped her mount her horse. "Let's get you to the schoolhouse. We'll need to warn the town council about this." They took a circuitous route into Willow Creek, avoiding the main road where they might encounter Tobias and his companions. The schoolhouse, when they reached it, looked even more modest than Tessa had remembered, a simple wooden structure with a small attached living quarters at the back. Reverend Clark was waiting for them, his expression concerned. "Word travels fast in these parts," he explained. "We heard Henderson was making threats in town. I came to make sure you arrived safely." Inside, the schoolroom was clean but sparse, rows of benches and desks facing a larger desk and blackboard. A pot-bellied stove stood in one corner, currently cold. The attached living quarters consisted of a single room with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table with 2 chairs, and a tiny cookstove. "It's not much," the Reverend apologized, but the previous teacher found it comfortable enough. "It's perfect," Tessa assured him, though her eyes kept darting to the windows, half expecting to see Tobias's angry face. Adam had stepped outside to speak privately with the Reverend. When they returned, both men looked serious. "Mrs. Henderson," Reverend Clark said, "in light of the circumstances, we've decided that it would be best if you had some protection, at least for the first few weeks. Mr. Calloway has volunteered to stay in town." Tessa looked at Adam in surprise. "But your duties at the ranch. Mr. Morgan anticipated this," Adam explained. "He's arranged for one of the other hands to cover my responsibilities temporarily. We've got a small room above the church office," the Reverend continued. "Not much more than a bed and a chair, but it's available immediately. And I'll be close enough to reach you quickly if there's trouble," Adam added. The idea of Adam staying nearby brought Tessa more comfort than she cared to admit.
"Thank you," she said simply.
After the Reverend left, promising to return in the morning to introduce Tessa to her pupils, Adam helped bring in her few belongings. In the small confines of the living quarters, his tall frame seemed to fill the space, making Tessa acutely aware of him in a way she hadn't been on the open trail. "Will you be all right here?" he asked, his concern evident. "It's rather isolated." Tessa summoned a brave smile. "I'll be fine. The door has a good lock and I'm not completely helpless." She hesitated, then added, "Besides, knowing you're nearby helps more than I can say." Adam's expression softened. "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to send for me, day or night." After he left to settle into his own temporary lodgings, Tessa sat on the edge of the narrow bed, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation with Tobias had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. But beneath the fear was a growing determination. She wouldn't let him drive her away from this opportunity, from this chance to rebuild her life. As darkness fell, Tessa lit the lamp and began unpacking her meager possessions. From the bottom of her carpet bag, she withdrew a small, worn book of poetry, a gift from her father that she'd managed to keep hidden from Tobias, who scorned reading as a waste of time. Opening it to a familiar page, she read the lines that had comforted her through many dark nights. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without the words and never stops at all." For the first time in a long while, Tessa felt that hope stirring within her. Tomorrow she would meet her students. Tomorrow, she would begin her new life. And for tonight, she was safe, with Adam Calloway standing guard not far away. The first day of school dawned bright but cold. Tessa had been awake since before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She dressed with care in her best dress, a modest navy blue with white collar and cuffs, and pinned her hair in a simple but neat style. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving, some alone, others accompanied by parents curious about the new teacher. Tessa stood at the schoolhouse door, greeting each one with a warm smile that belied her inner anxiety. There were 12 pupils in all, ranging from 6-year-old Sarah Miller, with her missing front teeth and eager smile, to 16-year-old James Peterson, the rancher's son, who slouched in with an air of reluctant obligation. When all were seated, Tessa moved to the front of the room, conscious of the many eyes upon her. "Good morning," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Mrs. Henderson, and I'm very pleased to be your new teacher." From the back of the room, James Peterson raised his hand. When Tessa acknowledged him, he asked bluntly, "Is it true you ran away from your husband, madam?" A ripple of whispers ran through the classroom. Tessa felt heat rise to her face, but met the boy's gaze directly. "That's a personal matter, James, and not relevant to our studies. Today we'll be assessing what each of you has learned so far, so I can plan our lessons accordingly." Another hand shot up, this time from 10-year-old Emily Watson. "My pa says your husband's looking for you. Says he's real mad."
Tessa's heart sank.
Of course the children would have heard the gossip. In a community this small, there were few secrets. "I understand you may have questions," she said carefully, "but this classroom is a place for learning. Your parents can discuss adult matters at home, if they wish." She picked up a piece of chalk. "Now, who can tell me what you were studying with your previous teacher?" By midday, Tessa had successfully redirected the children's attention to their studies. They were a bright group overall, if somewhat behind in certain subjects. She'd set the older students to working on arithmetic problems while she helped the younger ones with their letters. When she rang the bell for the lunch break, the children scattered to the yard to eat the food they'd brought from home. Tessa remained at her desk, reviewing her notes and trying to ignore the dull ache of hunger. In her nervousness that morning, she'd forgotten to prepare anything for herself. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Looking up, she was surprised to see Adam standing there, holding a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, stepping inside. "Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house packed this for you, when she heard you might not have had time to arrange meals yet." Touched by the thoughtfulness, Tessa accepted the bundle, which proved to contain a generous sandwich, an apple, and a slice of pie. "Please thank her for me. This is very kind." Adam nodded, glancing around the schoolroom. "How are the students?" "Curious," Tessa said wryly. "About me? More than their lessons, I'm afraid." "Children absorb everything adults say," Adam observed. "But they'll settle down once the novelty wears off." They ate together, Adam leaning against her desk while Tessa remained seated. Through the window, they could see the children playing in the yard, their shouts and laughter carrying on the crisp air. "Any sign of Tobias?" Tessa asked, keeping her voice low. Adam shook his head. "He and his friends spent the night drinking at the saloon. They're probably still sleeping it off." His expression grew serious. "But he won't give up easily, Tessa. Men like him can't stand to lose face." "I know," she sighed. "I lived with him for 5 years, remember? His pride is more precious to him than anything, certainly more than my happiness or safety." Adam's hand moved as if to cover hers, then withdrew. "The town's on your side. Reverend Clark has been speaking with the families, explaining the situation. And the sheriff here isn't in Tobias's pocket, unlike back in your old town." Before Tessa could respond, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch break. Adam straightened, gathering the remains of their meal. "I'll let you get back to your teaching, Mrs. Henderson." As the children filed back into the classroom, Tessa felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed of before Tobias had swept into her life with his smooth talk and false promises. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them. The afternoon passed quickly as Tessa divided the class into groups based on their abilities. She assigned reading passages to the older students while working directly with the younger ones on basic arithmetic. By the time the final bell rang at 4 o'clock, she felt a deep satisfaction despite her exhaustion. After the last child had departed, Tessa remained at her desk, making notes for the next day's lessons. The schoolroom was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the building settling. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't immediately notice the figure in the doorway. When she looked up, her heart lurched painfully. Tobias stood there, his bulky frame filling the entrance, hat in hand. He appeared sober, his clothes unusually neat, his dark hair slicked back with water or pomade. "Hello, Tessa," he said, his voice controlled in a way that sent a chill down her spine. She knew this Tobias, the calculated charmer he could be when he wanted something. This was the man who had courted her, who had convinced her father he would make a good husband. Tessa rose slowly, keeping the desk between them. "What do you want, Tobias?" He took a step into the room, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Is that any way to greet your husband? I've been worried sick about you, darling." "Don't," Tessa said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "Don't pretend you care about my welfare." Tobias's expression hardened briefly before smoothing out again. "I know I've made mistakes, Tessa. I've been under a lot of pressure with the farm, and sometimes I drink too much. But I'm trying to change." It was a speech she'd heard before, after each episode of violence. The remorse, the promises, the brief period of better behavior before the cycle began again. "It's too late," she said firmly. "I've started a new life here. I'm not coming back." Tobias moved further into the room, and Tessa tensed. "You're my wife," he said, his tone still reasonable but with an undercurrent of anger. "You took vows before God. Till death do us part, remember? Vows that you broke when you raised your hand to me," Tessa countered. "Please leave, Tobias. I have nothing more to say to you." He took another step closer, and Tessa backed away, bumping against the blackboard. "You've been filling people's heads with lies about me," he accused, his facade of reasonableness slipping. "Making me out to be some kind of monster." "I've told no lies," Tessa said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The bruises on my face told their own story." Tobias's expression darkened. "You always were clumsy. Probably tripped and fell, then blamed me to get sympathy." His voice lowered to a menacing growl. "And it worked, didn't it? Got that cowboy all fired up to protect you."
Are you spreading your legs for him now, Tessa?
"Is that why you won't come home?" The crude accusation struck Tessa like a physical blow. "Get out," she whispered, then louder. "Get out." Tobias lunged forward, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You're coming home with me, where you belong. I won't be made a fool of by my own wife." Tessa struggled against his grip, panic rising in her throat. "Let go of me. Help. Somebody help." The schoolroom door banged open, and Adam stood there, his expression thunderous. "Take your hands off her, Henderson." Tobias's grip tightened painfully on Tessa's arm. "This is between me and my wife, Calloway. Mind your own business." "I'm making it my business," Adam said, advancing into the room. "Let her go."
Now.
For a tense moment, Tobias hesitated, his eyes darting between Adam and the door. Then, with a curse, he shoved Tessa away from him. She stumbled against a desk, catching herself before she fell. "This isn't over," Tobias warned, backing toward the door. "She's still my wife under the law. No judge in the territory will grant her a divorce without my consent." "We'll see about that," Adam replied evenly. "Now get out before I throw you out." After Tobias had gone, slamming the door behind him, Adam quickly moved to Tessa's side. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her arm throbbed where Tobias had gripped it. "How did you know to come?" "I've been keeping an eye on the schoolhouse," Adam admitted. "When I saw Henderson heading this way, I followed him." He gently examined her arm, his touch feather light over the forming bruises. "We should have the doctor look at this." "It's nothing," Tessa insisted. "I've had worse." As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Adam's expression darkened with a mixture of anger and compassion. "You shouldn't have had to endure any of it," he said quietly. Tessa was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of Adam's hand still cradling her arm, of the concern in his eyes that seemed to hold something deeper. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "You shouldn't stay here tonight. It's too isolated. The Petersons have offered their spare room if you need it." The thought of returning to the empty schoolhouse, where Tobias knew she lived alone, was terrifying. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." As they walked to the Peterson ranch, Tessa tried to sort through her turbulent emotions. Fear of Tobias warred with a growing awareness of her feelings for Adam, feelings that were inappropriate for a married woman, even one separated from her husband. "Adam," she said hesitantly, "what Tobias said about us." Adam's stride faltered slightly, but he kept his eyes forward. "Don't give it another thought. Men like Henderson always assume the worst of others because it's what they would do themselves. Still, I don't want to cause trouble for you, or damage my reputation as a teacher." Adam stopped, turning to face her. "Tessa, you've done nothing wrong." "Nothing?" His voice softened. "As for my reputation, I'm a grown man who can take care of himself."
Don't worry about me.
But Tessa did worry, and not just about his reputation. She worried about the way her heart raced when he was near, about the dreams that had begun to feature his face rather than faceless freedom, about the future that seemed increasingly impossible given her circumstances. That night, in the Petersons' comfortable spare room, Tessa lay awake long after the household had gone to sleep. Through the window, she could see the stars scattered across the vast prairie sky, so much brighter than they had ever seemed back east. Somewhere in Willow Creek, Tobias was probably drinking and plotting his next move. And somewhere else, perhaps just across town in his room above the church office, Adam Calloway might be thinking of her. Tessa touched her bruised arm, a physical reminder of the life she'd left behind. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't go back to that life. She couldn't. Even if it meant fighting Tobias in court, even if it meant leaving Nebraska altogether, she would find a way to be free. With that resolution firm in her mind, Tessa finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next few weeks settled into a pattern. Tessa taught during the day, gradually winning over even the most skeptical students with her patient instruction and genuine interest in their progress. In the evenings, she alternated between staying with the Petersons and returning to the schoolhouse when Adam or another trusted townsperson could keep watch nearby. Tobias remained in Willow Creek, taking odd jobs and drinking away his earnings at the saloon. He made no further direct attempts to confront Tessa, but his presence was a constant shadow over her new life. Sometimes she would glimpse him watching the schoolhouse from a distance, or hear from well-meaning townsfolk that he'd been asking questions about her daily routine. Meanwhile, Thomas Morgan had made good on his promise to consult a lawyer in Omaha. The news, when it came, was not entirely encouraging. "The lawyer says you have grounds for divorce based on cruelty," Thomas explained during one of his visits to Willow Creek. "But Henderson could contest it, drag out the proceedings, make things difficult." "He will," Tessa said with certainty. "Just to punish me." Thomas nodded grimly. "There's another option. You could file for divorce in another territory, California, perhaps, or Colorado. Some have more progressive laws regarding married women's rights." The thought of traveling so far, of starting over yet again in an unfamiliar place, was daunting. But Tessa knew she might have no choice if she wanted true freedom from Tobias. As November gave way to December, preparations for Christmas began in earnest around Willow Creek. The school children were practicing carols for the annual pageant, and the ladies of the church were organizing a community dinner. Despite the shadow of Tobias's presence, Tessa found herself drawn into the festivities, grateful for the sense of belonging she'd begun to develop. Adam remained in town, though his duties occasionally called him back to the Morgan Ranch for a day or two. Whenever he returned, Tessa felt a surge of both relief and complicated emotion. They had developed a friendship of sorts, taking occasional meals together at the boarding house, discussing books they had both read, sharing stories of their lives before Nebraska. Yet there was always an invisible barrier between them, constructed partly from propriety and partly from Tessa's uncertain status. Adam never overstepped the bounds of friendship, though sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. One evening, as Tessa was grading papers in the schoolhouse, a fierce blizzard descended on Willow Creek with startling suddenness. The wind howled around the building, driving snow through every crack and crevice. She had just decided to abandon her work and hurry to the Petersons before the storm worsened when the door burst open, admitting a flurry of snow and Adam Calloway. "Thank goodness you're still here," he said, stamping snow from his boots. The storm came on faster than anyone expected. "It's not safe to be out there now." Tessa glanced anxiously toward the windows, where snow was already piling up against the glass. "Will we be able to reach the Petersons?" Adam shook his head. "Too risky in this visibility. We'd likely get lost between here and there." He began adding wood to the pot-bellied stove. "We'll have to wait it out here. The storm might pass by morning." The implications of this situation weren't lost on Tessa. Spending the night alone with Adam would certainly cause gossip, regardless of the circumstances. Yet the alternative, venturing out into the blizzard, was potentially deadly. "I was heading to check on you when the storm hit," Adam explained, working to build up the fire. "Good thing I was already nearby." As the heat from the stove began to fill the schoolroom, Tessa moved to the window, peering out at the white chaos beyond. "I've never seen snow like this. Back in Pennsylvania, we had storms, but nothing so wild." "Prairie blizzards are a different beast entirely," Adam agreed, coming to stand beside her. "I've seen them last for days, burying houses up to the roofline." A particularly strong gust rattled the windows, making Tessa jump. Adam's hand came to rest reassuringly on her shoulder, and the warmth of his touch seemed to spread through her entire body. "We'll be all right," he said quietly. "The schoolhouse is solid, and we've got plenty of firewood. Just have to wait it out." Tessa nodded, trying to ignore how aware she was of his proximity. "There's some food in my quarters: bread, cheese, apples. Not much of a meal, but better than nothing." They moved to the small living area attached to the schoolroom, where Tessa lit the lamps while Adam continued to build up the fire in the small cook-stove. The domestic intimacy of these actions wasn't lost on either of them. "People will talk," Tessa said as they sat at her small table, sharing the modest meal. "When they find out we spent the night here alone." Adam's expression was serious. "Your reputation matters to you. I understand that. But Tessa, sometimes you have to weigh propriety against survival. Anyone with sense will understand we had no choice." "Tobias will use it against me," she said softly. "He'll claim it proves his accusations." Adam's jaw tightened. "Henderson has no right to judge you." "None." "But he will," Tessa insisted. "And others might believe him." Adam reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Then we'll face that together, if it comes to it." His voice softened. "Tessa, I care about what happens to you. More than I probably should, given your situation." The confession hung in the air between them, neither fully acknowledged nor denied. Tessa's heart pounded in her chest as she met his gaze. "I care about you too, Adam. But I'm still married, at least in the eyes of the law. And I don't know when or if that will change." "I know," he said, withdrawing his hand reluctantly. "I'm not asking for anything, Tessa. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens, you're not alone in this." The howling of the wind outside seemed to underscore the isolation of their situation, cut off from the world, suspended in a moment out of time. As the evening progressed, they talked of many things: childhood memories, books they'd loved, dreams for the future. Adam spoke of the small ranch he hoped to build someday, with good grazing land and a comfortable house. Tessa shared her ambition to eventually open a proper school with multiple classrooms and a library. "You'd be good at that," Adam said, his admiration evident. "The children here already adore you." "Not all of them," Tessa laughed. "James Peterson still thinks schoolwork is a form of torture invented specifically to ruin his life." "He'll come around," Adam predicted. "Once he realizes that education might help him run his father's ranch more effectively someday." As the hour grew late, the question of sleeping arrangements became unavoidable. The living quarters contained only the single narrow bed, a fact that hadn't seemed problematic until now. "I'll take the floor in the schoolroom," Adam offered. "There are enough blankets to make a decent pallet." "You'll freeze out there," Tessa protested. "The stove in here holds heat better than the one in the classroom."
"I've slept in worse conditions," Adam assured her.
"During the war, we often bedded down in the open with nothing but a saddle for a pillow." The mention of the war surprised Tessa. Adam rarely spoke of his experiences as a young soldier. "You fought for the Union?" He nodded. "Joined up in '63 when I was 18. Saw action at Chickamauga and Atlanta. Not something I care to remember most days." Tessa studied his face, seeing the shadows of those memories in his eyes. On impulse, she reached out to touch his cheek, a gesture of comfort that felt both natural and daringly intimate. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for all you've endured." Adam turned his face slightly, his lips brushing against her palm in a touch so light she might have imagined it. "The past is past," he murmured. "It's the future that matters now." The air between them seemed charged with unspoken feelings. Tessa knew she should withdraw her hand, should establish proper distance between them. Instead, she found herself leaning closer, drawn by something beyond rational thought. Adam's breath caught, his eyes darkening. For a suspended moment, Tessa thought he might close the remaining distance between them. Then, with visible effort, he pulled back. "I should get those blankets," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "It's getting late." As he moved to the small trunk where extra bedding was stored, Tessa felt a confusing mixture of disappointment and relief. Adam was respecting her position, her marriage vows, even if those vows had been shattered by Tobias's cruelty. It was the honorable thing to do. Yet part of her, a part she wasn't entirely proud of, had wanted him to kiss her, to make real the connection that had been building between them for weeks. They prepared for sleep with careful politeness, Adam arranging his makeshift bed near the cook stove while Tessa changed into her nightgown behind the privacy screen in the corner. When she emerged, he was already stretched out on the floor, a blanket pulled up to his chest, his jacket folded as a pillow. "Good night, Tessa," he said quietly as she extinguished the lamp. "Good night, Adam," she replied, slipping into her own bed. "And thank you for everything." In the darkness, with only the occasional crack of the fire and the constant howl of the wind outside, Tessa lay awake, acutely aware of Adam's presence, just a few feet away. The storm had forced them into an intimacy that might never have developed otherwise. Yet rather than feeling threatened or compromised, Tessa felt strangely safer than she had in years. Sometime in the night, she woke to find the fire had died down. The room was cold, and she could see her breath misting in the faint moonlight that filtered through the window. On the floor, Adam was shivering visibly despite the blankets wrapped around him. Without fully considering the implications, Tessa slipped from her bed and knelt beside him. "Adam," she whispered, touching his shoulder. "Adam, wake up." He stirred, blinking up at her in confusion. "Tessa? What's wrong?" "You're freezing," she said simply. "The fire's nearly out."
Come to the bed.
It's warmer there. Adam shook his head, even as another shiver ran through him. I can't. Your reputation will survive. Tessa finished for him. But you might not if you catch pneumonia. She tugged at his arm. Please, Adam. It's just practical. We'll stay on opposite sides. After a moment's hesitation, Adam relented, following her to the narrow bed. They lay side by side, careful not to touch, the small mattress barely accommodating both of them. Better? Tessa asked, pulling the quilt over them both. Yes, Adam admitted. Thank you. In the darkness, their breathing gradually synchronized. Despite the innocence of the arrangement, Tessa felt a deep intimacy in sharing this small space with Adam. She could feel the warmth of his body beside hers, could smell the clean scent of his skin. Tessa, Adam said softly, his voice barely audible above the storm. I want you to know something. Whatever happens with Henderson with the divorce, I'll wait, however long it takes. The simple promise brought tears to Tessa's eyes. Adam, I can't ask that of you. It could be years before I'm legally free. If ever. You're not asking, he replied. I'm offering. Because what I feel for you. It's not something I've ever felt before. And I believe it's worth waiting for. Tessa turned on her side to face him, though she could barely make out his features in the darkness. I feel it too, she whispered. And it terrifies me, almost as much as it gives me hope. Adam's hand found hers beneath the blankets, their fingers intertwining. Then we'll be terrified and hopeful together. They fell asleep that way, hands clasped between them, the storm raging outside while they found a moment of peace within. Morning brought clear skies and a transformed landscape. Snow-blanketed Willow Creek in pristine white, drifts piled against buildings and fences. The storm had passed, but it had left its mark both on the town and on Tessa and Adam's relationship. They parted ways early, before the townspeople began digging out from the blizzard. Adam returned to his room above the church, while Tessa remained at the schoolhouse, preparing for the day's lessons, though she suspected few students would make it through the deep snow. She was right. Only the Peterson children and 2 others who lived in town managed to reach the school that day. Tessa kept them engaged with stories and simple lessons, her mind frequently drifting to the previous night and the promises exchanged in darkness. By mid-afternoon, paths had been cleared through the main streets, and life in Willow Creek began returning to normal. Tessa dismissed her few students early and was arranging books on the shelf when Reverend Clark appeared at the schoolhouse door. Mrs. Henderson, he greeted her, stamping snow from his boots. I trust you weathered the storm safely? Yes, thank you, Tessa replied, wondering how much he knew about her unplanned night with Adam. The Reverend's next words answered that question. Mr. Calloway mentioned he checked on you just before the blizzard hit. A fortunate timing, it seems. Very fortunate, Tessa agreed cautiously. Reverend Clark studied her face for a moment, then sighed. Mrs. Henderson, I consider myself a practical man as well as a spiritual one. Sometimes circumstances force good people into situations that might appear compromising. Tessa felt heat rise to her cheeks. Reverend, I assure you, he held up a hand to stop her. No explanations needed. I trust your character, and I trust Calloway's. But not everyone in town will be so understanding, particularly given your complicated marital situation. Has Tobias been saying things? Tessa asked, her stomach nodding with anxiety. He was at the saloon this morning, yes, making certain insinuations. The Reverend's expression was sympathetic but serious. Mrs. Henderson, the school board hired you because you're an excellent teacher. The children are learning more with you in 2 weeks than they did in a month with your predecessor. But the parents entrust us with their children partly based on moral character. Are you asking for my resignation? Tessa asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising within her. Absolutely not, Reverend Clark said firmly. I'm simply suggesting that discretion might be advisable. Perhaps Mr. Calloway should return to the Morgan Ranch, at least temporarily. Remove the appearance of impropriety. The thought of Adam leaving, of losing his steady presence and protection, filled Tessa with dread. Yet she understood the Reverend's concerns. Her position as teacher was precarious enough, without adding scandal to the mix. I understand, she said quietly. And I appreciate your candor, Reverend. After he left, Tessa sank into her chair, conflict roiling within her. Just when she and Adam had acknowledged their feelings for each other, circumstances were conspiring to separate them. That evening, as Tessa prepared a simple supper in her quarters, a knock at the door announced Adam's arrival. His expression was grave as he entered, removing his hat. You've heard, he said, not really a question. Tessa nodded. Reverend Clark visited this afternoon. Adam paced the small room, frustration evident in every line of his body. Henderson's poisoning the well, making it impossible for you to stay here if I remain. It's not fair, Tessa said, anger bubbling up through her resignation. Why should his lies dictate our lives? Because we're playing by society's rules, Adam replied bitterly. Rules that give a husband power over his wife, even when he's abused that power. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. I've been thinking about what Thomas said. About filing for divorce in another territory. Tessa stilled. You want me to leave Willow Creek? I want you to be free, Adam clarified. Truly free, not just living in limbo, looking over your shoulder for Henderson's next move. He took a step closer. Tessa, I could take you to Denver. The laws in Colorado Territory are more favorable for cases like yours. And Henderson would have a harder time interfering if you were hundreds of miles away. The proposal was both terrifying and tempting. What about my teaching position? The children? There are schools in Colorado too, Adam pointed out. Good ones that would value your skills. And you? Tessa asked softly. What would you do? Adam's eyes held hers steadily. Whatever you wanted me to. I could help you get settled, then return to Nebraska. Or... He hesitated. Or I could stay. Start building that ranch I told you about. If that's something you might want. The implication was clear. Adam was offering her a future together, once she was legally free to choose it. It's a lot to consider, Tessa said, her mind whirling with possibilities and concerns. I know, Adam acknowledged. And I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Just think about it, please. After he left, Tessa stood at the window for a long time, watching the moonlight reflect off the snow-covered landscape. The practical challenges of Adam's suggestion were significant. The journey itself would be difficult in winter, and she had almost no money saved yet from her teaching position. Yet the prospect of true freedom, of a life unclouded by Tobias's threats and the town's gossip, was powerfully alluring. And the thought of building that life with Adam beside her made her heart swell with possibilities she'd thought forever closed to her. Sleep eluded Tessa that night as she weighed her options. By morning, she had made her decision. She would finish out the school term, which ended just before Christmas. Then, if Adam was still willing, she would journey to Denver to file for divorce. What came after would depend on many factors, not least the legal process itself. But for the first time since fleeing Tobias, Tessa felt she was choosing her path rather than merely reacting to circumstances. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Adam, respecting Reverend Clark's concerns, returned to the Morgan Ranch, though he rode into Willow Creek every few days to check on Tessa. They maintained a careful distance in public, their interactions cordial but proper. Tobias, perhaps emboldened by Adam's departure, became more visible around town, watching the schoolhouse from across the street or deliberately crossing Tessa's path as she walked to and from the boarding house, where she now took her meals. He made no direct threats, but his presence was menacing enough. As the end of the school term approached, Tessa met with Thomas Morgan to discuss her plans. He listened thoughtfully, then offered practical assistance. "The stagecoach to Denver is expensive, and the journey is rough this time of year," he said. "I've got a better idea. One of my business associates is heading to Denver next week with a private wagon trains several families relocating for various reasons. He's agreed to include you in their party, at my request." "That's incredibly generous," Tessa said, moved by his continued support. Thomas waved away her thanks. "I've also taken the liberty of writing to a lawyer in Denver who specializes in these matters. He'll be expecting you." He slid an envelope across the table. "And this should help with initial expenses." Tessa began to protest, but Thomas cut her off. "It's not charity, Mrs. Henderson. It's an investment in justice. Pay it back someday by helping another woman in similar circumstances." The final day of school before the Christmas break was bittersweet. Tessa had grown fond of her pupils, and saying goodbye, even temporarily, as she'd told them, was harder than she'd expected. The children presented her with small gifts and handmade cards, unaware that their teacher might not return after the holiday. That evening, as Tessa packed her few belongings, a commotion outside drew her to the window. Tobias was striding toward the schoolhouse, his face flushed with what she recognized as drunken rage. Behind him, several townspeople had gathered, including Reverend Clark and the sheriff. Tessa's heart raced with fear, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd known this confrontation was likely inevitable. Squaring her shoulders, she moved to the door, opening it before Tobias could pound on it. "What do you want, Tobias?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "You know damn well what I want," he slurred, swaying slightly. "You're my wife. Time to come home where you belong." Tessa was acutely aware of the audience gathered behind him. "I'm not going anywhere with you. Not now, not ever." Tobias's face darkened.
You don't get to decide that.
"The law's on my side." "The law doesn't give you the right to beat your wife," Tessa countered, her voice rising with newfound courage. "It doesn't give you the right to threaten and intimidate her. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to force her to return to a home where she fears for her life." Murmurs ran through the gathered crowd. Tobias glanced back, seeming to realize for the first time that they had an audience. "She's lying," he said, addressing the townspeople rather than Tessa. "Making up stories to justify running off with that cowboy from the Morgan place." "I've told no lies," Tessa said clearly, stepping forward onto the schoolhouse porch. "Every woman here knows the truth of what I'm saying. Some have lived it themselves." Several women in the crowd nodded, their expressions grim. One stepped forward, Mrs. Peterson, whose home had sheltered Tessa on numerous occasions. "My sister died at the hands of her husband," she said, her voice carrying in the winter air. "After years of abuse that everyone saw but no one stopped. I won't stand by and watch it happen again." "This isn't your business," Tobias snapped, but his confidence was visibly wavering. "It became our business when you brought your threats to our town," Reverend Clark said, moving to stand beside Mrs. Peterson. "When you disrupted our school and harassed our teacher." "Our teacher," echoed several voices in the crowd. The sheriff finally stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Tobias's arm. "I think you'd better come with me, Henderson. Sleep it off in the jail, then head back to your own town tomorrow." "You can't do this," Tobias protested, but his words lacked conviction as he looked around at the united front of Willow Creek citizens. "I can and I am," the sheriff replied firmly. "Now come along quietly, or I'll have to add resisting arrest to public intoxication and disturbing the peace." As the sheriff led Tobias away, Tessa felt a wave of gratitude for the community that had rallied around her. Yet she knew this was only a temporary victory. Tobias would be released in the morning, and his humiliation would only fuel his determination to reclaim her. Later that night, a soft knock at her door revealed Adam, his face grave. I heard what happened, he said. Are you all right? Tessa nodded, stepping back to let him enter. Better than I expected, actually. It was empowering to finally stand up to him in public, to speak the truth without shame. Adam's expression softened with pride. You're the bravest person I know, Tessa Henderson. Not brave, she corrected him. Just tired of being afraid. She gestured for him to sit. The wagon train leaves the day after tomorrow. Thomas has arranged everything. I know, Adam said. I'll be going with you. Tessa looked at him in surprise. But your position at the ranch, Thomas understands, Adam explained. He's given me leave to escort you to Denver and help you get settled. He hesitated, then added, after that. Well, that's up to you. The unspoken question hung between them. Would she want him to stay? To be part of the new life she was building? Adam, Tessa began, then faltered, unsure how to express the tumult of emotions within her. I don't know what the future holds. The divorce could take months, even years. It wouldn't be fair to ask you to wait, to put your life on hold for something so uncertain. You're not asking, Adam reminded her, echoing his words from the night of the blizzard. I'm offering. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Tessa, I love you. I've never said those words to another woman, and I never thought I would. But there it is. I love you, and I want to build a life with you, however long it takes. Tears welled in Tessa's eyes at the simple, honest declaration. I love you too, she whispered. And that terrifies me, because I've trusted before and been so wrong. I know, Adam said, his voice rough with emotion. And I know words are just words until they're backed by actions. So let me show you, day by day, that this love is real, that it's nothing like what you had with Henderson. Tessa raised her free hand to touch his cheek, feeling the slight roughness of stubble beneath her palm. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. Adam turned his face to press a kiss into her palm, the gesture he'd almost made that night during the blizzard. This time, Tessa didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, her heart pounding as their lips met in a kiss that was gentle but full of promise. When they parted, Adam rested his forehead against hers. We'll take it slowly, he promised. One day at a time. Tessa nodded, a sense of peace settling over her despite the uncertainties that still lay ahead. One day at a time. The journey to Denver was arduous, but uneventful. The wagon train consisted of 3 families and a merchant transporting goods, all traveling together for safety through the winter landscape. Tessa rode in the merchant's wagon, while Adam alternated between riding alongside and driving one of the family wagons when its owner needed rest. They passed Christmas on the trail, a modest celebration around campfires with shared food and simple gifts. Tessa had fashioned small cloth dolls for the children in the party, while Adam had whittled wooden animals for the boys. That night, as the families retired to their wagons and the watch was set, Adam and Tessa stood together beneath a canopy of stars. Not exactly the Christmas I imagined, Adam admitted, his arm around her shoulders to ward off the cold. It's perfect, Tessa said, leaning into his warmth. I'm free. I'm moving toward a future of my own choosing, and I'm with you. What more could I want? Adam's kiss was her Christmas gift that, and the promise of many more Christmases to come, once her legal situation was resolved. Denver in January was a bustling city compared to the small settlements Tessa had known. Streets teemed with people from all walks of life, miners fresh from the gold fields, elegant ladies in fashionable dress, businessmen hurrying to appointments, and cowboys in from the surrounding ranches. The lawyer Thomas had recommended, Mr. Franklin, proved to be a shrewd, no-nonsense man with a reputation for handling difficult cases. He listened to Tessa's story without interruption, then laid out her options with brutal honesty. Colorado Territory has more progressive laws regarding divorce than Nebraska, he explained, but it's still not a simple process. The grounds of cruelty are well established in your case, but your husband could contest the jurisdiction since the marriage and alleged abuse occurred in Nebraska. What are my chances? Tessa asked bluntly. Mr. Franklin considered. With evidence of the abuse witness statements from the Morgans and others who saw your injuries, I'd say good. Not certain, but good. The real question is whether Henderson will fight it. He will, Tessa said with certainty. Out of spite, if nothing else. Then we prepare for a fight, the lawyer said, his expression determined. It may take time, Mrs. Henderson, but I've yet to lose a case where justice was so clearly on my side. In the weeks that followed, Tessa settled into life in Denver. With Adam's help, she found a small but comfortable apartment in a respectable boarding house that catered to working women. A letter of recommendation from Reverend Clark helped her secure a position at a local school, teaching the children of Denver's growing middle class. Adam, true to his word, found work at a nearby ranch, visiting Tessa whenever his duties allowed. Their relationship blossomed in this new environment, away from the shadows of the past. They attended church together on Sundays, explored the city on her days off, and gradually built a circle of friends who accepted their unconventional situation without judgment. Spring arrived, bringing new growth to the mountain landscape and new developments in Tessa's divorce case. Mr. Franklin had filed the necessary papers, and as predicted, Tobias had contested the action vigorously. He had even traveled to Denver, hiring a local lawyer known for his aggressive tactics. He's demanding your return to Nebraska, Mr. Franklin reported during one of their meetings. Claims you abandoned the marital home without cause, taking valuable property with you. That's absurd, Adam interjected. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back. The lawyer nodded. And we have witnesses to attest to that fact. But Henderson is throwing everything at the wall, hoping something will stick. He's also making personal allegations. Tessa's stomach nodded. About Adam and me.
Yes.
Claiming your relationship predated your departure from the marriage. Adam's expression darkened. That's a damned lie. Of course it is, Mr. Franklin agreed. And we'll present evidence to refute it. But I want you both prepared for the unpleasantness that may arise in court. The hearing was set for early June. As the date approached, Tessa alternated between determination and anxiety. The thought of facing Tobias across a courtroom, of having the most painful aspects of her marriage exposed to public scrutiny, was daunting. Yet the prospect of legal freedom, of a life unburdened by Tobias's claims, made the ordeal worthwhile. The night before the hearing, Adam came to the boarding house. They sat in the small parlor, where the landlady allowed visitors under her watchful eye. Whatever happens tomorrow, Adam said, taking Tessa's hands in his, remember that you've already won the most important battle. You're living on your own terms, supporting yourself, making your own choices. Henderson can't take that away, whatever the judge decides. Tessa squeezed his hands gratefully. Having you beside me makes all the difference. I don't think I could face this alone. You could, Adam said with quiet conviction. You're stronger than you know, Tessa Henderson. But I'm glad you don't have to. The courtroom was smaller than Tessa had imagined, the proceedings less formal but no less intimidating. Judge Harmon, a stern-faced man with penetrating eyes, presided from behind a simple wooden bench. Tobias sat with his lawyer on one side of the room, his expression a mixture of anger and calculation that Tessa remembered all too well. Mr. Franklin presented their case methodically, calling witnesses who had traveled from Nebraska to testify: Thomas Morgan, Reverend Clark, even the doctor who had treated Tessa's injuries. Adam's testimony was particularly powerful, his description of finding Tessa hiding in the root cellar painting a vivid picture of a woman in desperate fear for her life. When Tessa herself took the stand, she spoke clearly and directly, despite the trembling of her hands. She detailed the years of abuse, the escalating violence, the isolation Tobias had imposed on her. And she answered honestly when Tobias's lawyer questioned her about her relationship with Adam. Mr. Calloway has been a friend and protector, she stated. Any deeper feelings developed only after I had left my husband, and we have conducted ourselves with propriety throughout. Tobias's testimony was a masterful performance of injured innocence. He portrayed himself as a hardworking farmer whose wife had been led astray by romantic notions and the attentions of another man. The bruises, he claimed, were the result of Tessa's own clumsiness or self-inflicted to justify her abandonment of her marital duties. By the time the hearing concluded, Tessa was exhausted but oddly calm. She had spoken her truth, without shame or hesitation. Whatever the outcome, she had reclaimed her voice. Judge Harmon announced that he would consider the evidence and deliver his ruling the following day. That night, unable to sleep, Tessa sat by the window of her small room, watching the stars and thinking of another night, months ago, when she had huddled in a root cellar, believing her life was over. How far she had come since then. From a terrified woman with no options to a teacher with her own income, her own home, and a circle of supportive friends. And Adam, who had been patient and steadfast, never pushing but always present, offering love without demands or conditions. The next morning, the courtroom was packed with spectators, the case having attracted attention due to the prominent Nebraska witnesses and the unusual circumstances. Judge Harmon entered, his expression giving nothing away as he took his seat. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in this case, he began, I find the following, that the petitioner, Tessa Henderson, has established grounds for divorce on the basis of extreme cruelty. That the allegations made by the respondent, Tobias Henderson, regarding infidelity are without merit and appear to be motivated by malice rather than fact. Tessa's heart soared as the judge continued, systematically dismantling each of Tobias's claims and affirming the validity of her petition. When he finally pronounced the marriage dissolved, tears of relief spilled down her cheeks. Furthermore, Judge Harmon added, fixing Tobias with a stern gaze, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. Henderson from approaching or contacting Mrs. Henderson in any way. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and imprisonment. Outside the courthouse, Tobias confronted Tessa and Adam one final time. This isn't over, he snarled, his face contorted with rage. You've made a fool of me, but I won't forget it. It is over, Henderson, Adam said firmly, placing himself between Tessa and her former husband. The judge made that clear. You come near her again, you'll answer to the law. For a moment, Tobias looked as if he might lunge at Adam. Consequences be damned. Then, with a final venomous glare at Tessa, he stalked away. Do you think he'll abide by the restraining order? Tessa asked as they watched him go. I think he values his freedom too much to risk prison, Adam replied. But if it would make you feel safer, we could consider moving further west. California, perhaps, or Oregon. The thought was tempting a fresh start in a place where no one knew their history. But Denver had become home in the months since their arrival. Tessa had students who depended on her, colleagues who respected her, a life she had built with her own determination and skill. Let's not make any hasty decisions, she said. For now, I just want to enjoy this moment. To be Tessa Henderson, divorced woman and free citizen. Adam smiled, offering his arm as they descended the courthouse steps. To new beginnings, then. To new beginnings, Tessa agreed, taking his arm and stepping into the bright June sunshine. Epilogue 1 year later, the small ranch house stood on a rise overlooking a creek, its newly built walls gleaming in the summer sunlight. Behind it, a modest barn housed several horses and a milk cow, while a fenced pasture contained a growing herd of cattle, the beginning of what Adam hoped would eventually be a profitable operation. Inside, Tessa moved between the kitchen and dining room, setting the table for the visitors expected that afternoon. Through the window, she could see Adam in the yard, splitting logs for the winter that was still months away. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular arms as he swung the axe with practiced efficiency. So much had changed in the year since the divorce. Adam had purchased this land outside Denver with savings from his years at the Morgan Ranch, supplemented by a loan from Thomas himself. They had married in a simple ceremony last autumn, with the Morgans traveling from Nebraska to stand as witnesses. Tessa continued teaching at the Denver school, riding in each morning on the sturdy mare Adam had given her as a wedding present. The combination of her salary and Adam's growing ranching operation allowed them to live comfortably, if not luxuriously. More importantly, they lived happily, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. They had heard, through letters from Willow Creek, that Tobias had eventually sold his Nebraska farm and headed further west, reportedly to the Washington Territory. The news had lifted a weight from Tessa's shoulders. Though she no longer feared him as she once had, the knowledge that he was far away brought additional peace. As she arranged wildflowers in a jar for the table centerpiece, Tessa felt Adam's arms encircle her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "They're here," he murmured, nodding toward the window where a wagon could be seen approaching along the road. "Right on time." Tessa turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoe to kiss him quickly. "Then we'd better make ourselves presentable. I can't have the Morgans thinking we live like savages out here." Adam laughed, stealing another kiss before releasing her. "Speak for yourself. I've always been the picture of civilization." As they walked out to greet their guests, Tessa's hand found Adam's, their fingers intertwining naturally. The summer breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers, and in the distance, a meadowlark's song rose clear and sweet. "Happy?" Adam asked softly, glancing down at her. Tessa smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought her here from a terrified woman hiding in a root cellar to the confident, loved person she was today. "Completely," she answered. "More than I ever dreamed possible." As Thomas and Alice Morgan's wagon drew nearer, Tessa reflected on the strange twists of fate that had shaped her life. If she hadn't found the courage to flee that night, if Adam hadn't happened to ride by the farm the next morning, if he hadn't spoken those simple, transformative words, "You're safe here," how different everything might have been. Some would call it luck or coincidence. Tessa preferred to think of it as destiny, the universe conspiring to bring her exactly where she was meant to be, beside the man whose love had helped her rebuild not just her life, but her sense of self. And as she stepped forward to welcome their friends, Tessa Henderson Calloway knew with absolute certainty that she was, at last and forever, truly safe.